The old farmhouse on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Vermont, had always been a sanctuary for Eleanor Vance. Its weathered clapboard siding, the creak of its ancient floorboards, and the sprawling maple tree in the front yard held a lifetime of memories. But for the past 8 years, it had also been a place of quiet solitude, a testament to a rift that had torn her family apart. The silence, once comforting, now often felt heavy, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets or the rustle of leaves in the autumn wind. 8 years ago, the world Eleanor knew had fractured. Her son, Michael, her only child, had been swept away by the tide of his wife, Sarah's, disapproval. Sarah, a woman of sharp edges and even sharper opinions, had deemed Eleanor toxic. The word, delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel, had cut deep, leaving a wound that never truly healed. Boundaries, rigid and unyielding, were erected, effectively exiling Eleanor from Michael's life, and more painfully, from the upbringing of her beloved granddaughter, Lily. The vibrant tapestry of family life, once rich with laughter and shared moments, had unraveled into a single frayed thread. In the wake of this devastating estrangement, Eleanor had found solace and purpose in rebuilding her life in Asheville, North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Mountains, with their ancient, rolling peaks, offered a different kind of comfort than the familiar New England landscape. Here, she found kindred spirits in a pottery class, her hands shaping clay into vessels that mirrored her own slow, deliberate reconstruction. Her sister, Clara, a free-spirited artist who lived nearby, became her anchor, her confidant, and her fiercest advocate. Clara, with her bohemian scarves and infectious laugh, reminded Eleanor that joy could still be found amidst the sorrow. And then there was David, a kind-eyed retired history professor she met at a local bookstore. Their shared love for literature and long walks through the botanical gardens blossomed into a gentle, supportive friendship that filled some of the empty spaces in Eleanor's heart. Life in Asheville was good, a balm to her wounded soul. She had learned to navigate the quiet rhythm of her days, finding contentment in her art, her friendships, and the breathtaking beauty of her surroundings. The pain of Michael's absence never truly vanished, but it receded, becoming a dull ache rather than a searing wound. She had built a new life, a resilient one, far from the accusations and the imposed silence. Then, a year ago, Clara, her vibrant, life-affirming sister, passed away unexpectedly after a sudden illness. The loss was profound, a fresh wave of grief that threatened to drown Eleanor in its depths. Clara had left her the Willow Creek farmhouse, a place they had spent countless summers as children, a place filled with the ghosts of their shared past. It was a bittersweet inheritance, a tangible piece of Clara's enduring love, but also a reminder of what Eleanor had lost. Eleanor decided to move back to Willow Creek, to honor Clara's memory, and to find a new chapter in the familiar landscape of her youth. She spent months restoring the old house, painting the walls, tending the overgrown garden, and filling it with Clara's vibrant artwork. It was a labor of love, a way to keep Clara's spirit alive. It was precisely 3 months after Eleanor had settled back into the Willow Creek farmhouse that the email arrived. The sender? Michael. The subject line? Willow Creek. Eleanor's heart, which had learned to beat steadily through years of quiet resignation, now hammered against her ribs. 8 years of silence, broken by a subject line that screamed of opportunism. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this sudden outreach was not born of genuine longing for connection, but rather by the news of Clara's passing and the subsequent inheritance. The farmhouse, Clara's beloved sanctuary, was now a pawn in a game she hadn't asked to play. Eleanor, a woman who had learned the hard way to protect her peace, was not naive. The years of estrangement had forged a steel resolve within her. She anticipated Michael and Sarah's motives with a clarity born of past pain. Before even replying to Michael's email, she consulted with a local attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Brenda, who advised her on her legal rights regarding the property. Eleanor wanted to be prepared, to ensure that her emotional vulnerability would not be exploited. She also called David, her steadfast friend from Asheville, and asked him to come to Willow Creek. His calm presence and unwavering support would be a much-needed buffer against the emotional onslaught she knew was coming. When Michael and Sarah's sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse, kicking up a cloud of dust, Eleanor felt a familiar tightening in her chest. David stood beside her on the porch, his hand a reassuring weight on her arm. Michael, taller and broader than she remembered, looked strained, his eyes avoiding hers. Sarah, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of calculated composure, offered a tight, almost imperceptible smile. The air crackled with unspoken tension, a fragile truce before the inevitable battle. After an awkward exchange of pleasantries, during which Sarah made pointed comments about the farmhouse's potential, and Michael shifted uncomfortably, they settled into the living room. Eleanor had chosen the setting carefully, a room filled with Clara's vibrant paintings, a subtle reminder of the sister whose legacy they were now discussing. David sat quietly in a corner, his presence a silent sentinel.
Sarah, ever the aggressor, wasted no time.
"Eleanor," she began, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We were so sorry to hear about Clara. She was unique." The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult. Eleanor merely nodded, her gaze steady. "We understand you've inherited the farmhouse," Michael interjected, his voice softer, laced with a hint of desperation. "It's a beautiful place. So much history." "It is," Eleanor agreed, her voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Clara loved it deeply." Then came the pivot. Sarah leaned forward, her hands clasped, a picture of earnest concern. "Eleanor, we've been going through a really tough time financially. Michael's job, it's not as stable as it once was. And with Lily getting older, expenses are just piling up." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We were thinking, perhaps we could stay here for a while, just until we get back on our feet. It would be such a help." Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. It was exactly as she had predicted. The inheritance, a symbol of Clara's love, was being viewed as a solution to their problems, a means to an end. Her heart ached, not for the loss of the farmhouse, but for the blatant disregard for her feelings, for the years of silence that had preceded this sudden, self-serving interest. "Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice firm, "I appreciate you sharing your difficulties, but this farmhouse is not a temporary solution for your financial woes." She met Sarah's gaze directly. "This is my home now. It was Clara's legacy to me." Michael finally spoke up, his voice tinged with a plea. "Mom, please. We're really struggling. Just for a few months. We could help with repairs, upkeep." Eleanor held up a hand, stopping him. "Michael, I love you. You are my son. But I've learned some difficult lessons over the past 8 years about boundaries and self-respect." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I'm choosing to love my son without letting that love be used as a lever. This farmhouse, this inheritance, is not a bargain." Michael, please, spoke up, his voice tinged with a plea. "Mom, please, we're really struggling. Just for a few months. We could help with repairs, upkeep." Eleanor held up a hand, stopping him. "Michael, I love you. You are my son. But I've learned some difficult lessons over the past 8 years about boundaries and self-respect." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I'm choosing to love my son without letting that love be used as a lever. This farmhouse, this inheritance, is not a bargaining chip for a relationship." Sarah's composure faltered, a flicker of anger in her eyes. "So you're just going to turn your back on your own son when he needs you? After all these years?" "I never turned my back on him, Sarah. Eleanor retorted, her voice rising slightly. You did. You set the terms of our estrangement. I merely accepted them and built a new life. She looked at Michael, her eyes softening slightly. I have always kept the door open for a genuine connection, Michael, but not one based on manipulation or expectation of material gain. The confrontation continued for another hour, a dance of veiled accusations and steadfast refusal. Eleanor, supported by David's silent presence, stood firm. She offered no financial assistance, no temporary housing. She offered only the truth, that her love was not conditional, but her boundaries were absolute. Eventually, defeated and frustrated, Michael and Sarah left, the gravel crunching under their tires as they sped away, leaving behind a silence that, this time, felt lighter, imbued with a sense of hard-won peace. 3 weeks after the tense encounter at Willow Creek, Eleanor was in her pottery studio, the scent of damp clay filling the air, when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Hello? Mom, it's Michael. His voice was tentative, almost shy. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. This was different. This was not Sarah's calculated maneuvering. This was Michael, on his own. Michael, she replied, her voice calm, though her hands trembled slightly. What can I do for you? I need to talk to you. Really talk. Can I come see you in Asheville? Eleanor paused, a wave of cautious hope washing over her. Yes, Michael, you can. A few days later, Michael arrived in Asheville. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, a stark contrast to the guarded, almost defiant man who had visited Willow Creek. Eleanor met him at the small airport, and for the first time in 8 years, they embraced. It was a hesitant, awkward hug, but it was a start. They spent the next few days talking, truly talking, for the first time in nearly a decade. They walked through the vibrant streets of Asheville, sat by the French Broad River, and shared meals at Eleanor's favorite cafes. Michael spoke honestly, raw and vulnerable, about his marriage to Sarah. He admitted that he had allowed Sarah to dictate their relationship with Eleanor, that he had prioritized keeping the peace in his own home over maintaining a connection with his mother. He confessed his regret, his shame, and the deep loneliness he had felt, even amidst his own family. I realized, he said one evening, as they sat on Eleanor's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, that keeping the peace with Sarah meant sacrificing my own peace, and losing you, and Lily. His voice cracked. I let her convince me you were toxic, Mom, but I see now, I was just too weak to stand up for what was right. Eleanor listened, her heart aching for the years lost, but also swelling with a fragile hope. She didn't interrupt, didn't accuse. She simply listened, offering a comforting hand when his voice faltered. He spoke of Sarah's controlling nature, her constant need for validation, and how he had slowly become a shadow of his former self, constantly trying to appease her. When you stood your ground at Willow Creek, Michael continued, looking at her with tear-filled eyes, it was like a wake-up call. I saw you, strong and dignified, and I realized how much I'd missed that, how much I'd missed you. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice gentle. Michael, I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. But I also had to protect myself. My boundaries were for my own well-being, not to punish you. Over the next few months, the slow thaw continued. Michael began to visit Eleanor regularly in Asheville. He started therapy, a step Eleanor had quietly hoped for. He began to assert himself more in his own life, making difficult but necessary decisions. The most significant of these was his decision to separate from Sarah. It was a painful process, but one he knew was essential for his own healing, and for the possibility of genuine reconciliation with his mother, and, eventually, his daughter. The video concludes with a hopeful, albeit cautious, path forward. Michael, now living in a small apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, has begun to visit with Lily, albeit under supervised conditions initially. Eleanor has traveled to Charlotte to spend time with her granddaughter, their reunion a tender, tearful affair. Lily, now a bright-eyed teenager, remembered her grandmother, and their connection, though fragile, began to mend. Eleanor acknowledges that the future is uncertain. The wounds of 8 years run deep, and healing is a long, arduous journey. But she finds a profound peace in having maintained her boundaries, in having refused to let her love be leveraged. By doing so, she had kept the door open, not for a forced or manipulative reunion, but for a genuine, heartfelt reconnection. The echoes of Willow Creek, once a symbol of loss, now whispered of hope, of a family slowly, painstakingly, finding its way back to each other, one honest conversation at a time. The old farmhouse, standing sentinel in Vermont, now felt less like a monument to estrangement and more like a beacon of possibility.